Everyone, let's talk about a little something known as consumer rights. And to get there, I'm going to start with something that's been near and dear to my heart for about 40 years now, gaming. More specifically, video gaming. Yes, that's right, I am a gamer. I've been a gamer for pretty much all my life. My family and I would play video games together. We would play the old King's Quest games. My mother primarily got me into gaming because my mother was freaking Tommy whenever she got near a pinball table. So with that out of the way, how does this pertain to consumer rights? Well, the the thing that sparked me making this video is Google recently starting up their new online gaming service called Stadia, which is a cloud gaming service. So first, let me explain what that is. With this service, you get to play these games. It's kind of like, you can think of it like an arcade, okay? When we were, well, if you're old enough to remember what an arcade is, sure, you have some arcades now, but it's just not the same. Well, it may or may not be the same, depending on the laws of the state that you live in. I live in the state of New Jersey, and the laws here are all fucked up with when it comes to arcades. But the idea is that before we had home console systems, we had the arcades. You would go out to the arcades, and it was a great time. You get to hang out, be social with everybody, boys, girls, men, women. Everybody would just kind of hang out, play video games, challenge each other, try to best each other's score, and it was one of the great times of socialization in this country. Was an arcade. Then you had consoles come out, which, hey, you could take these arcade games home, or at least so you were told, but the Atari 2600 did not have the processing power of an arcade machine, and the Atari 5200 barely had the processing power of the arcade machines, and technology kept getting better and better and better at the time. So, with Google Stadia, it brings video gaming somewhat back to the days of the arcade, but without the friendly socialization, because we know every online gaming forum now is a goddamn dumpster fire with all people yelling and screaming at each other, because every fucking MOBA in the world has you partnered up with randos that you probably don't know, well, that you don't know and probably don't want to play alongside and have your win or loss be dependent on anyways. So the thing with Google Stadia is that you can purchase to play these games, but the problem is that you don't actually own any of these games. On its head, this doesn't seem like a bad thing when you know, like I said, if you're comparing to the arcades and whatnot. However, for the longest time, video gaming has been a thing of ownership. You buy a game, you own it forever and ever and ever. This also, of course, ties into movies and music, and I'll get to that more in a little bit. Actually, I'll get to that more a little right now. But something recently that has become recently popular with AAA developers is digital rights management, where you don't actually own a game, you just own a license to play the game, which, quite frankly, is bullshit. For one, they started implementing this as a thing you have to agree to after the fact, which is a violation of the first sale doctrine. For those of you who don't know what it is, you know, look it up. But basically, it says once you pay for something and it's yours, and the person that made the item wants to say you can or can't do this with it, you can just turn around and say, "Fuck you! I paid for it. Guess who can go sit and spin?" So the whole idea of games not being something of ownership but something that is leased to you, or, you know, the idea of games as a service, has been encroaching on gamers for a long time now. And personally, it's one of the reasons why I just don't buy AAA games anymore. If I'm paying money for something, I'm going to buy it. I'm not going to rent it. There's no point in feeling like I own something if I don't actually own something. That's why I don't really get into DRM controlled stuff, but you also see this in movies and music as well. Back in the 80s, if you heard a song on the radio, you could just record it on your cassette player, which wasn't really technically legal, but if you had if you had bought the cassette, you could make another copy for yourself because everybody in the fucking 80s, even myself, had their own damn mixtape. Um, and that would be perfectly legal as long as you weren't distributing it. Um, but now, it's from what I understand, there's legislation that's trying to prevent people from doing that. Or not really prevent people from doing it, but preventing it from being legal in any way. So if you have a movie, you want to rip the movie onto your computer so that you don't have to get off your fat ass, walk over to your DVD stack, and then pop the DVD in, and watch it that way. That's I'm fucking starting to say again a lot, but that's being made illegal, illegitimate, whatever you want to call it. However, this doesn't just this issue of consumer rights doesn't just stop at media. Okay, there are to go back into video games some more. You also have this whole issue, and really electronics in general, where if you would have warranty void if label is broken, which in a recent case was ruled to be illegitimate. I'm not sure if it changed after that. But really, it made no sense if you just broke a label and parts still work out the same. You didn't do anything. You just opened it up and you were able to put it back the same way. And what you did didn't cause something to break. That the warranty shouldn't be valid anymore. You're also seeing this in I believe it's Caterpillar is preventing people from doing any work on their own. The machines that they purchase, saying you have to any work done to one of your devices or one of your machines has to be done at an authorized Caterpillar site. Again, I'm not sure that's Caterpillar. I think it's Caterpillar, but I'm not 100% sure. But I know it's one of the companies that sells that particular type of construction and equipment and whatnot. So the fact is that consumer rights have been getting whittled down more and more over the past couple of decades. Recently, there was an issue with Apple. Customs seized these batteries, these Apple batteries that somebody was purchasing because he was doing repairs on Apple products, and Apple didn't want him to do these repairs with these batteries. I haven't followed up on it, but it's kind of hazy. But it's something along the lines of these batteries that may or may not have been legitimate batteries, and Customs stopped them because they may have been counterfeit, and the guy probably didn't know. But things like Apple wanting you to have your repairs only done in an Apple store, this is also realistically a violation of your consumer rights. Now, some people have made the argument that, if I own an Apple product and I want to sell it, but I've had some work, if I buy a used Apple product, then it should still function like an Apple product. So if it breaks down, I should be able to take the Apple and say, hey, this is your product, it broke, so you need to fix this. And that is a completely fucking stupid argument. If you buy something used, oh well. If the person you bought it from is going to give you a warranty, that's fine, but that's responsible of the person you bought it from. Now, if you take your phone to some third-party repair site, they repair it, and they say they used only official products of whatever, Apple or Samsung or whatever, and then it breaks afterwards, well, Apple has no liability in that issue because unless you can prove that the parts were Apple parts and they broke down on their own behalf. So this is really these are really just stupid arguments against consumer rights for companies to have more control over your products that you purchase after you purchase them. So this is stuff that we really need to be looking out for. And again, in the gaming world and media world, this has been happening for a long time now, and it's only been getting worse. So what can we do to stop this? Well, the bottom line is vote with your wallet. and also be smarter about what your expectations should be. Like I said, I don't purchase AAA games anymore because I have no interest in buying strict DRM controlled stuff where I can't just take it, have to play a game that's on and be online to play a game, and whatnot. I don't buy anything that I can't. Well, I try not to buy anything that I can't fix myself. And I'd like to just do a little bit of social commentary here, just for shits and giggles. Back in the days of yesteryear, it was always the stereotype that men had tools and men would fix everything themselves, and women would have to find a guy to rely on to fix things, and would basically nag men for having tools and whatnot. So this is kind of the issue, really, of what we're seeing here of why men would have tools. Tools represent freedom. They represent self-reliance. They represent understanding and knowing what you have, so that you don't have to cow to anyone else in order to keep things in your home running and working smoothly. And whereas women at the time were just basically like, oh, I can always just call somebody. And this isn't necessarily their fault. This is, based on how men and women were brought up in the days of yesteryear. So these women were basically taught that they shouldn't be self-reliant at all. They should rely on other people, and that gets frustrating, because in the end you become the useless burden. And it's something we see in kids nowadays a lot. When I had a friend who taught in middle school, and he was told that the kids were never supposed to seek answers for themselves, that the kids always had to ask him for answers. This is something that's always detrimental to a person. And I can sympathize, because when I was a kid, again, I was in somewhat of these more traditional households, and I was always told by the women in my family that I should never learn to cook or sew or do any of that stuff, because I was required to marry a woman that could do this stuff for me. And my response was, why the fuck should I depend on a woman for anything? Just the same way as I would expect a girl to say, why the fuck should I depend on a man for anything? And that's part of the reason why, when I used to want to have kids, I wanted to have a daughter just so I could make sure that she grew up learning all the things and not relying on anybody for any shit like that. So, fighting loss of consumer rights, you have to learn how to be more self-sufficient. Never believe that you are... never believe that you should rely on somebody else, but never believe that you know enough to get by in life. Always try to learn things more. Learn how things work. That's how I've always lived, and that's how I've always been able to, well, for one, it saves you a lot of money when you can do everything yourself. And that what winds up being the ultimate statement there is voting with your wallet, right? The companies can't make money off of you if you know how to do things yourself. But there's a bad culture of consumerism in this country. People who buy things just to spend money. Instead of learning how to cook, people just want to go out to eat just for the sake of, oh my god, it's going to, I don't have to stand for 5 more minutes. Or shit like that. And realistically, I'm saying it, realistically, education in this country has become less of actual education and more of consumer education, where people are just paying for the ability to say they've been educated without actually getting the education. And this, it ties into the whole scandal that, the non-scandal scandal, because the not news that came out recently about the kids getting into college when they didn't actually deserve it. So, bottom line, again, learn how to do everything yourself, as much as you can. Don't rely on other people unless you absolutely have to. And if you think you know enough, you don't know enough. So get to learning.